Mark has been doing these recitals for almost as many years as he's been lead minister here. And I think this year, Mark, did you not celebrate the 10th anniversary? Yes, 10, there we are. So this is probably Mark's 9th or 10th recital here. A wonderfully multi-talented gentleman. A privilege to have him here as our lead minister. Please welcome Mark Lewis.
Douglas, thank you so much for allowing me a space in the concert series. I truly feel privileged and honored that you let me do this. And thanks to all of you who are here. I'm so appreciative of having some people to talk to and sing for. So thank you all so very much. The underlying thesis of this concert, I'm not sure if a concert ought to have a thesis or not, is that the present shift to the right in society and politics indicates a yearning for the past which is not entirely healthy. It is characterized by such things as our lovely motto in the United States, "Make America Great Again," and by the success of Brexit and by present movements towards the right in France. I believe that all of that movement towards a strange form of conservatism is driven by privileged white men for whom the past truly was great because they had everything. But what is that past that they remember and of which they speak? It is, of course, the past that existed before the rise of civil rights, before the rise of women's equality, before immigrants were received with love and compassion, before the United Nations drafted its Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this most recent revival, I believe, is the last desperate cry of the angry white man. I do not refer to any particular person in individual. It is about a beast that lives within all of us and would like to see things restored to a time when the weak and broken people were crushed beneath our feet. I truly believe that this is the last dying cry of that beast, and that when we get one final taste of how horrible it is, we will return to a time of justice, equality, goodness, and dignity for all people. I want to tell you a little bit about how this beast has risen again in my own life story. And it starts out in the year 1963 in a little tiny town in southwestern Ontario where I was a 5-year-old kid going to church. And one day someone gave the church a wonderful gift, a portrait of Jesus, a copy of which you have, but none of you have looked at yet because it's behind that red velvet curtain. You see, that's how the gift came to our church, and we set it up right in the chancel where we could all see it, but with the red velvet drape over it, so it was a mystery. And we were going to unveil that picture on Easter morning and finally get to see just what Jesus looked like. And it was up for about 6 weeks. And every week we came into church and we looked at it and we waited, thinking we're finally going to see how Jesus looks. And then the beautiful day finally came. The great unveiling. Don't peek yet. From farm and field and the co-op store, from kitchen tables and stools we pour, honest, decent, working folk, heads bowed low, no words were spoke. We came to church in all that morn. The preacher said, "We've seen the Lord." We waited weeks, that's why we came. A drape of cloth hung o'er the frame. Don't look yet. We heard beautiful image of Jesus that you see before you is based on a much earlier painting by Michelangelo. It is most likely a painting of his lover, Caesar Borgia, who was the son of Pope Alexander VI. And very likely the backstory would not be pleasing to many people who uphold that image as the true image of Jesus Christ. At the time, the church was trying to firmly establish its stronghold in the world, and of course, in order for a white European church to dominate, it had to be made clear that God was also a white European male. The actual painting that you're seeing may look familiar to you. In fact, it would be almost a miracle if you have not seen that particular picture before. It was painted by a man called Werner Solomon in the year 1940, and it is perhaps the most copied and sold piece of art in the history of the world. It's likely the only piece of art exceeding that in the number of reproductions is the image of Queen Elizabeth used on every British stamp since about 1970. 500 million copies of that image exist. European culture embraced it because they were sure that they were seeing the real Jesus when they saw that. The idea that Jesus was a North African or Asiatic in his appearance would have been completely unacceptable and unproductive for furthering the strength of a white European church. Some of you may have read Philip Yancey's book, written in 1995, entitled The Jesus I Never Knew. In that book, Yancey makes a very powerful case for the fact that it is entirely unlikely that Jesus would have had those physical characteristics. Our little church loved and adored that picture. But it was not the church alone that was directing me to the thought that God was a white male European and that sort of person should dominate the world. Right next to our little church in Dewart was my public school, Oxford County SS number 3 and 4, and I know you're stunned saying, wow, Mark, you started school in a 2-room school? It must be impossible, but that is the case. In grade 1, the teacher made a gallant attempt to teach us multiculturalism and gave us a picture of all kinds of different people and a set of crayons with which to color. And I remember her clearly saying to me, now, the yellow crayons are for Chinese people, and the red crayons are for Indians, and the brown crayons are for African people, and the pink crayon is for normal people. I carried that with me for a long time. In grade 4, now in a different town, we had a new teacher. Her name was Mrs. Grant. She was from Jamaica, and was the first person of African descent that I had ever seen. And I still remember a day when we were doing a very similar multicultural exercise in Mrs. Grant's class. I explained to her the yellow crayon is for the Chinese people, brown crayon is for the African people, and the red crayon for the Indian people, and the pink crayon for the normal people. Mrs. Grant and I had some discussion. No one ever meant to do me wrong. They carried me descent is so difficult because it relies on nostalgia, and everyone has beautiful memories of how the past was. But nostalgia can be a terrible liar. The past was not that great for minorities or women or children or immigrants. Even in my idyllic little town, there was ugliness and violence and prejudice and racism destroying people's lives, even though it looked to be a beautiful and perfect place. So this next song, I think it's called The Dark Side of Nostalgia, and it talks about how, depending on your perspective, the past can look very different. And it's a very weird song. I hope it works. It's sort of like two songs with a bright and happy song up on top, but a dark and sad song underneath. And I have no idea if this is going to work out. Is there a place for you where everything is perfect? A place where all memories are sweet. For me it was a small town in the country where God's children lived in peace and harmony. How was I to know it had a dark side? So many years before I knew it lied. We wouldn't let the slave descendants farm there. We said that they'd be better in their own right. Is there a place for you where everything was perfect? A place where all memories are sweet. Sometimes nostalgia is a wicked liar, not showing all the pain that lies beneath. They called her everything they could imagine. When Mrs. K packed up the kids and left her man, it was 20 years before we knew what they endured. The secret brutal beatings at his hands. Is there a place for you where everything was perfect? Look again and force yourself to see. What may have seemed idyllic on the surface was God's children steeped in willful cruelty. My blindness as a child would be forgiven, but now there's no excuse not to tell. In the place we think that we have built a heaven, there are those for whom our heaven seems like hell. After World War II, and particularly in response to the Holocaust, the United Nations drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I have copied just a little bit of it on the back of the folder today. A declaration declaring that all people were equal and free and had dignity and had the right to live under the rule of law, which meant that there could not be the completely uncontrolled exercise of power over those who were weak. Following that Universal Declaration, there was a wave of civil rights progress for minorities, women, children, refugees, a beautiful age of recognizing the dignity of all human beings. It it now appears that there is a thread of going back into the past, and the past to which certain people refer is certainly the sort of past that existed prior to the drafting of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. For a small minority of people, they were great days. But we were horrified after World War II when we saw what happened when there was no law. We looked at what happened with the Jewish people in Europe, that they were rounded up and registered. And we, that is humanity, collectively cried out, never again, never again, never again. But now it appears some voices are saying, just one more time. It is the opposite of the gospel. The gospel is the source of the idea that all human beings are equal and beautiful and precious in the sight of the one Creator, God. It is not a natural idea, and it is a very frail idea which could fall and crumble at any moment if there are not people to stand up for it. In nature, there is no equality. The strong truly are worth more than the weak. The healthy are worth more than the sick. The majority is greater than the minority. That's how nature functions. And unless there are people like you to stand up and say, no, this isn't right, all people are equal, whomever they are, then this trend towards going back into a corrupted past will continue. This final psalm talks about the rise of that ugly beast. Also, it expresses my great hope that this is the last desperate cry of that dying beast, just before we enter a new age of wonderful love and dignity. And to sing this song, I need to call on my special musical guest to help me out, my daughter Ruth. And you can go over to this side. Go over here. Don't be a comedian.
Oh, sorry.
Don't do it. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay, you get a bit closer to the mic. And I'll back off. Something dark and something evil rising in the public square. The great revival of the late beast, a sickening evil we can't bear. It's the voice of the angry white man, one last chance at the lion's share. We all thought it could not happen. Oh, and such audacity! Forget your poor heart of masses. Line up the postmen's for their ID. It's the voice of the angry white man. Run never again to one more time. We build a wall to keep their time out, or to send them back on a ship or a plane. We'll wrap them up in a registration. We'll make our nation great again. It's the voice of fierce priest, one last cry of a dying beast. And will you stand and watch it happen?